Hello friends, Mr. E here, and we are over 5 weeks since the release of Skitarii, and I have to say this class has been a resounding success for the game. I'm certain for Fat Shark in no small way as well, and the community has absolutely loved this guy. He adds a lot of diversity, he's a really cool character aesthetically, and it's just super fun and just a great idea. The talent tree is so awesome. Big round of applause to everybody who worked on this character. Gotta say, my favorite release for the game so far. However, I will say that I think I speak for the majority of the player base when I say, wow, Skitarii sure was a lot of fun. But what's next? Gimme, Fat Shark, and hurry up while you're at it, because my attention span is only so long. Turns out it's like a little bit under 5 weeks, and I need something new for my tanks, or else I'm gonna go crazy. I'm kidding, obviously, but only a little bit, because that's just sort of how these things go, right? The new toys are only flashy for so long, and I think that one of the things that plays as a double-edged sword to Darktide is that it is a game that has a lot of potential, where there's a lot of avenues where players could imagine new mechanics and new classes and new weapons and new maps and new environs and stuff like that, but it is untapped potential. So Fat Shark has their work cut out for them. There's a ton of runway here where they could be building up and coming up with new ideas and making it work with Darktide. The framework is so awesome, but they gotta do that work to get it in there. So I'll be making videos about what could we be seeing for existing class reworks or new maps or, fingers crossed, guys, new weapons. Even if I have to pay for the fucking things, right? I would pay like $5 for a weapon pack. That would be fucking like dope at this point. But there's one thing that's on my mind, and I'm certain on a lot of yours as well, is will we be continuing to receive new DLC classes? Because we have 3 already. That's a total of 7 classes in the game. And when is enough, right? Are we gonna be getting these forever? So that is what the video is about today. I have 3 simple questions to ask or pose to you and somewhat try to answer. The first one being, will we be receiving any more DLC classes? The second being, when could we be receiving those DLC classes? And the third being, what would those classes be? So let's start out with the first of those questions, is will we be receiving more DLC classes? Now, my intuition and the evidence, little, whispers here and there that I've heard, indicate to me that I would almost guarantee we will be receiving at least 1 more DLC class. Now, to me, this feels like a natural sort of tying up point for these DLC classes, at least for the immediate. If they want to return to it in the future, certainly. But I think if you got to having 4 base classes and 4 DLC classes, doing that, somewhat regularly for 2 years, that seems to me a good place to sort of say, hey, we're done with that little project and we can go on to working on other elements of their game. Because while it has been resoundingly successful and obviously has produced a lot of revenue for them, there are other elements of the game, and working on classes for half of your updates, it leaves those other ones disregarded. But I would say that the number one reason, and I'm not being snarky by saying this, but it has to be one of the most motivating factors for producing more DLC classes for any company, is, as Mr. Krabs will tell you, money, right? It is a very profitable venture for Fat Shark to continue to make DLC classes to a point, because they get paid every time they do it. There's nothing else that they make for the game that they get paid for, because buying the base game at this point is dirt cheap. And the amount of people that are going to buy the base game for some new maps that haven't already bought it is probably close to 0. But you will get double dipped on making new classes, because people want to play the new thing, and people, if it's a property that they like, for instance, the Skitarii, right? A lot of AdMech fans who had never played Darktide before probably purchased Darktide just to then purchase the DLC and play Darktide as the Skitarii. So that was a big windfall for them, and of course they're going to want to continue to keep that revenue stream alive, because at this point, we're almost 4 years on from the release of Darktide. The initial purchase monies have probably dried up, considering they're developing not only this game, but another game in the background that is unrelated to Darktide. So with that being said, I think that the economic realities of the world would point to, yes, we will be receiving more DLC characters. Now, the question would be, is when? Are we going to continue to follow in the trend that we have for the last 18 months where we get another DLC character every 6 months on the dot? Will this be a winter release? And I suspect yes. I suspect that we will have a fall release that will be something to do with rebalancing existing characters. Hopefully there's at least one map snuck in there as well. Some more content, a few weapon tweaks, a few maybe new marks or something. But I'm assuming that we will be receiving our 8th playable character class in the winter because they have already clearly got a code name picked out for it. This is something that the game director Victor shared with Jefficus in a recent interview, which is that the code name for the new character, it starts with a D because they are following the ABCD code name pattern. So the first character being Arbides was Adamant, for A for Adamant, then the Broker was B, and that was the Hive Scum, and C for Cryptic, being the Skitarii, so D for whatever the heck it is, will be the next class. So they've at least got that picked out already. I'm certain that they have a sort of a streamline now that they have made 3 DLC classes. They probably have a pretty functional pipeline sort of set up to get these things rolling and get them working. So it makes a lot of sense they would have something else cooking until the point where they say enough is enough. And we know they had at least 3 or more ideas on their shortlist for what they wanted to add to the game. So yeah, we're definitely not short on ideas. Now, as far as will they continue after this fact? Will they continue with the 9th and 10th and 11th and 12th classes? Well, that is a lot of commitment. And it's a lot of commitment for a game that is getting pretty old at this point. I think that one of the awesome things, like I said earlier about Darktide, is that there's a lot of avenues they could develop this game in. And while they might release more classes, they don't need to be doing it every 6 months at a certain point. They could shift to doing it just every year or so. And I think that would be very, very, players would be very content with one new class every year and then maps and weapons and stuff on the side, new enemies, etc. So where are they going to pull these classes from? How are they getting the ideas they had so far? And what could we be seeing going forward for our 8th playable character class? And that is where we're going to turn to some existing documentation that I think might just give the entire game away. So one of the best things about developing a game, or really anything within the 40K universe, is that you have a virtually unlimited well of existing lore, of existing content, of material, of games to draw from. You can just simply do what I always say when I'm talking about the creative process and just steal some ideas, co-opt them, make them your own, and put your own spin on them, and you'll be off to an amazing head start. And that is something that Fat Shark are no strangers to. We know that there is a ton of inspiration they draw for their enemies, for their player characters, for their weapons alike from the current codices, from the 10th edition, from the 9th edition, as well as just various 40K stuff. They've found a way to write their world into the greater lore and make all that stuff work together. But there is one particular rulebook, there's one particular game, tabletop game, that they have drawn a lot of inspiration from very clearly in the past, and I think it's safe to say they could be returning to it today. And that is this tabletop game called Dark Heresy. Now, Dark Heresy is not to be confused with the Dark Heresy CRPG that Owlcat Games is developing. I think it's supposed to come out of beta later this year. And that game is based on the same sort of universe, or the same localized universe, as the Dark Heresy tabletop role-playing game. And if we go back to the first edition tabletop role-playing game, we can go to the character creation area and look at the playable character classes. Now, in Dark Heresy first edition, there are 8 playable character classes, and out of those original 8, here are 3. The Cleric, the Guardsman, and the Imperial Psyker. Now, it doesn't take an overly critical eye to look at these and realize, that seems oddly familiar to some other game I might be a little bit familiar with. That being the Cleric as the Zealot, the Guardsman as the Veteran, and the Imperial Psyker as the, Imperial Psyker, I suppose. Or rather just ex-Imperial Psyker, because we are a prisoner. So that means that we should look at what other playable character classes there were for this Dark Heresy game. Maybe there's some additional inspiration they could be drawing from those. Well, there's also the Adept and the Arbitrator. The Adept is a scholar, sort of a know-it-all, very much like a lore bard or something. Probably not that interesting to put into a game like Darktide, which is mostly about combat. But the Arbitrator, that seems like a really good idea, honestly. They should probably put that... Oh, they already did? Oh, okay. Well, maybe we should look at some of the next characters they could put in. Maybe they could do a Scum or a Tech Priest. Okay, so you see where I'm going with this, right? So we have received almost all of these. The Tech Priest, I believe, was the original intention for the Skitarii. I believe that they started with a more generalist view on what the Skitarii would be before getting the approval and the notion to make it specifically a Skitarius versus a more generalist Adeptus Mechanicus, because, you know, extra branding power. But there is one class left, one class that would actually fit in Darktide, unlike the Adept concept over here, that is an untapped, and that is the Assassin. So the Assassin, as a concept, is something that players have long wanted, and we could be seeing that if we're drawing from this 8-character list, and we have 8 characters, we could very much be seeing this. And if you were to look at this as a whole, right, if we took out Adept and literally just said, this isn't Adept, this is, of course, Ogren. Now we have all 8 characters in Darktide here, right? If Assassin is our 8th character, and that would mean this is 100% where they're drawing from. This doesn't have to be hard and fast, though. There is potential for lots of other characters, and there are plenty and plenty of IDs they could be drawing upon. And let me show you another repository that they could potentially be getting ideas from, in case you are hoping desperately that it is not an Assassin character. So of course, there are more places to draw from for Fat Shark than just the Dark Heresy tabletop RPG system. They could also draw from this RPG system called Wrath and Glory, which coincidentally in 2018 published a book called Dark Tides here. That was before Darktide actually came out, but it was probably within the realm of time where they were developing the name, so maybe not a coincidence. What definitely isn't a coincidence is the fact there was a very literal extraction for playing Darktide within this rule set. So what this means for as far as basing our discussion around what characters could they be pulling for inclusion in our Darktide cast of characters, well, it would make sense that if the character could fit into this setting here, well, then it'll fit into the very literal setting that this is based around, which is coming to Tertium and fighting alongside the Inquisition. So all we have to, of course, Dark Heresy isn't the only place that Fat Shark can draw from. As I said, there is a veritable endless amount of content that they could be perusing in order to make these new classes, or rather improvise on existing classes, existing concepts within the 40k universe. And one of the places that I am pretty certain they have been sharing ideas with, and not just pretty certain, but 100% certain, is the Wrath and Glory series here. Coincidentally, in 2018, one of the rule books featured the name Dark Tides. Makes you think, huh? But this was probably maybe a coincidence 1 year before Darktide was even announced, as I remember. But what isn't a coincidence is the fact that there is very literally a Darktide rulebook for this game, so you can play within the actual literal space of Tertium, and this rule set has storylines in it that include lore for the game, right? You are going to be playing alongside what would be presumably inquisitorial operatives that are operating on Tertium within this setting. And that means that all we have to do in order to figure out what sort of characters might be appropriate to include in a setting like this, to include in a setting like the literal game Darktide we're talking about, is just to figure out what sort of characters we can roll in this game, right? And so what I did is I went to this site and I went ahead and just sort of filtered by the selections I think would be most likely to appear within our compatriots as the Inquisitional operatives. So as far as species, humans, as well as some flavor like the Ratlings, Squats, Kroot, Aldari, I think these are all probably the most likely to be appearing alongside the Inquisition. Maybe there's some outside chance of something else, but these are the most likely, I would say 99 times out of 100. And then as far as factions, pretty much everything that could even be loosely affiliated with the Inquisition would be over here. And as far as power level, I've set the power level to 2 out of a maximum of 5, because the 2 power level, well, as you'll see as we scroll through this, has a lot of very, very familiar faces that should let you know that we're on the right scale in terms of what would be appropriate to include alongside our rejects. And so we have familiar sort of sounding things like weapons specialist, veteran guardsman, right? These are pretty similar to concepts we already have. Rogue psyker, We also have concepts like the scum, right? We have the hive gangers, the gang leaders. We have the hive scum. We have underworld syndicates, which is sort of what the hive scum are supposed to represent. We have concepts that haven't been explored yet, like void pirates and the rogue traders in general, just straight pirates. And then we have agents of the Adeptus Ministorum, the official state-sanctioned religion of the Imperium of Man. Maybe they could be called to the planet to sort of balance out the cult mechanicus who's overwhelming the place lately. We have Electro Priests and the Skitarii Vanguard appearing up here. But let's go to the other page because there's plenty more they could be grabbing from. We have Aldari Bone Singers. This is one of my favorite ideas, is Aldari, sort of psychokinetically gifted warriors. That would be super, super cool as an inclusion, but it might be a little bit far afield where we're at right now. We have the Arbitrator, representative of the Adeptus Arbites, seems kind of familiar, right? We have the Aldari Rangers, we have more scum up here, we have the Skitarius, we have the Sanctioned Psyker, aka our regular Psyker, and then we have these top 4 up here, which I have seen a lot of discussion of. So as far as these last 4 on the list here, I think they're all golden opportunities for Fat Shark to add a playable character class. They definitely have tons of potential. They are right on the money in terms of the power level. They also would be pretty damn easy to integrate into the existing storyline, and I think for the most part, they're pretty recognizable names, which is something that they definitely want to hit. You don't want to end up with another Hive Scum situation where, like, no one really cares about Hive Scum. No one's a really big Hive Scum fan out there, so yeah. But when we look at this list, Rogue Traders, Tempestus Scions, Sisters of Battle, Death Cult Assassins, I think for the most part, people recognize those names and they have some familiarity with them, and they at least get a concept of what it would be like to play with them. All those except for probably Tempestus Scion, which I think would be the weakest inclusion here. There are 2 on this list that I think will probably not be selected, and I'll tell you why. And the first is, of course, the Tempestus Scion. First of all, these guys just don't have, at least to me, as a 40k novice, the name recognition that a lot of these other types of characters do, and therefore it's going to mean less pull for people to be like, I wonder what it would be like to play as that character. Secondly, and more importantly, is that these guys are more or less just the Delta Force of the Astra Militarum, which means that, you know, those really annoying Steam forum posts that pop up every time there's a new character, like, oh, X character is just the veteran but better, and now there's no reason to play veteran ever, I'm uninstalling. Get ready for 50 times more of those posts, and they're all right, because this is literally just a better version of the veteran. They have better training, they have better gear, they are more hardened in their resolve. Like, they are just, imagine you were trying to make a tabletop game and you had to differentiate the 2 classes, and one of them was, like I said, the Delta Force, and the other was the Army Rangers. You would be really hard up to kind of make the differentiation between those. So yeah, that's going to be a problem to make that not just feel like the veteran. Same problem you run into if you're trying to make the Sister of Battle, I think. And of course, the Sister of Battle could be made to feel very different than the Zealot, but it's going to be a lot of extra work, because let's just kind of look at it from its core concepts. Both the Sister of Battle and the Zealot are mostly melee-focused fighters. They both wield Holy Emperor of Mankind, sort of, I don't know, what you'd call it, magic, and they are zealous for their causes, and they are going to wield heavy weapons in their secondary. They have flamers, they have bolters. Sister of Battle has Melta, but, you know, maybe Zealot could have Melta, right? And all of that says to me, yes, of course, with enough effort, with enough elbow grease, you could differentiate the Sister of Battle from the Zealot, but it would be a lot of work, and you'd probably still step on each other's toes. Versus our last 2 candidates here, the Rogue Trader and the Death Cult Assassin. These guys have a ton of blank canvas to work with. So these 2 are my top choices for what we might be seeing in Darktide. The Rogue Trader is a really solid choice from like a lore perspective, and represents the blankest canvas that Fat Shark could possibly give themselves. Because one of the things that made the choice of bringing the Skitarii into the game so strong was we have no representation of the Adeptus Mechanicus at all, right? So you can literally just do anything in that realm and you've got something novel. Same thing goes here. Rogue Traders are so diverse. As anyone who's played Rogue Trader, like the CRPG from Alcat, can tell you, you can literally be anything, wield anything as a rogue trader. It's down to your background, right? So they are incredibly diverse. That means that Fat Shark could come up with all sorts of crazy concepts to wrap in here. And rogue traders are 1,000,000% tied up in the storyline and the neighborhood, the sort of galactic planetary neighborhood of Darktide, of the same system that the Tertium was in, the Mobian domain. So very, very high likelihood we could be seeing something with rogue traders here, considering the fact that we have tons of relations with rogue traders already, including Hallowett. And then we have the Death Cult Assassin, who is a sort of a corrective force within the Adeptus Ministorum, to put it lightly. More or less, you are sent to eliminate people who oppose the Imperium of Man's official state-sanctioned religion. And that, you know, we are on a planet that has trillions of people on it. The Hive City has been corrupted by at least one cult of chaos worship, of Nurgle worship, and now we have the goddamn robots out here who are spreading the cult Mechanicus. You know, that I think would be all the more reason that the Ministorum would need to dispatch some of its agents to, you know, kind of set the record straight as to what the correct religion is to be following. And this could be a really, really interesting and novel concept to introduce. Not to mention, like assassin archetypes and archetypes like this are something that characters really, really, really want to play as, and there's lots of cool stuff that they can do as well. But I think that probably the thing that gets me the most interested in the Death Cult Assassin and the Rogue Trader, as far as introducing them to the parties, is thinking about the potential, like, interrelations of how these characters would interact with each other. The rogue traders, because they come from a variety of backgrounds, they are kind of like the fish out of water, right? Everybody else has this kind of like rough and tumble background. They could be anything from more like regal and sort of oligarchic and talking down, or they could just be like, you know, Looney Tunes, like out of left field, like just actual crazy people who are out here, just absolutely eccentric types. Rogue traders can run the absolute gamut, so you could have a ton of fun writing them and having them be the you know, sort of outsider voice whenever you get the group who's communicating with each other. Same thing with the Death Cult Assassin. For them, because they have such a adherence, like a zealous adherence to their particular ideology, putting them paired with other characters who have their own ideologies, like the Arbites, who literally just only care about the Lex, or the Skitarii, who are, to a Death Cult Assassin, to a member of the Adeptus Ministorum, would kind of technically be a heretic. Like, they let the cult Mechanicus, and that's why they call it the cult Mechanicus, they let them worship their Omnissiah, but they look at them with, like, a lot of disdain. It would definitely be a fun thing to see them try to coexist within that framework. And I think that is one of the things that Fat Shark will definitely be looking at when they're introducing these, as well as like, what would the introduction story be? For rogue traders, it's super obvious. Again, for the Death Cult Assassin, it would be something like, just like with the Arbites, where it's like, oh great, you know, things weren't complicated enough on Atoma. Now here comes the fucking Adeptus Ministorum. More bureaucracy come to put their fucking boot on our throat. And, hell, yes, hello, welcome. Oh yes, we have a bunch of assassins on the ship now. Great. I can just imagine Rannox saying that in his little voice. So there you go. That is what I'm thinking so far, guys. Of course, we don't have any hard and fast information. When I do, I'll be certain to share it with you, but I'm very excited to see what sort of leaks start to filter out about these characters, and of course, all the other stuff going on leading up to it. Either way, I'll be here for it. I hope you guys are as well. I hope you're having a good one. I'll see you next time. Mystery out of here. Bye-bye.